Hello everybody, welcome back to How to RPG. Yes, you can see before you not one blazing skeleton or flaming skeleton, not two, but three, which means, will I get them all done in an hour? Oh, I think it's very unlikely, but we're still going to give it a go. This is me on holiday, cruising. I'm going to talk about stuff. I thought I'd talk about the fighter today and just hang out and paint this miniature. So I'm going to put up a poll. Feel free to take part in that poll if you're interested, or just grab your own paints and miniatures, settle down with some food and drink and just get comfortable and just hang out with me for a little while I work through this. Anyway, let's put up this poll and get this done, shall we? And the poll is very much around the topic that I thought I would talk about because my group has been talking about it recently. So yes, yeah, we'll see if people are interested. If you're not, you're just going to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler and I'm on holiday and I'm going to be painting a blazing skeleton. In fact, I'm going to be painting 3 blazing skeletons and talking about stuff, probably the fighter for D&D 5e, because that's kind of where my head is at right now, is the different classes and what I would do with them. And since my group are still playing 5e, kind of, if I had to describe what our game was right now, I'm not sure it would make sense. So yeah, there's a lot going on. So what I did is I've actually, there's not a lot of cleanup on these miniatures. They are translucent miniatures. All 3 of them were, so I sprayed them with a primer. I had a spray can that has a pretty good primer, so it doesn't lose a lot of detail when you spray it on. And I was very careful. I did it in 3 applications so that I didn't make a mess. And then once I did that, I actually painted these 3 very quickly with white. And you can see the white is very, very thin, and it's not really showing up that much. But I'm still going to do this because the idea is, if you want flaming skeleton, you want colours to be bright. The idea is you don't start with black, you actually start with a white colour or a white base. So I'm going to paint this one white now, and then I'm going to go over to the other ones and start working on them. So if it'll stop rolling, which I don't think it will, there we go, it's stopped. Good. How's it going, Phil? How are you? So yes, I thought it would be cool to talk about the fighter because, as people know, Wizards of the Coast is trying to update their stuff and do their own thing, and I was not that impressed by the fighter. Again, it suffers from the same problems I think it's always suffered from, and it seems quite clear to me that Wizards of the Coast is not capable of fixing that problem. If they ever were. Let's get real. If they ever were capable. So one of the aspects of being a fighter is not just fighting, even though it's called the fighter. And as many of you know, for years they have struggled with the concept of giving the fighter something to do as a class feature that doesn't involve just swinging their weapons, swinging a sword or a weapon, or doing something with their, more attacks, better chance to hit, doing more damage, all that sort of stuff. So the colour that I'm using, this is actually the Vallejo white, if you're wondering. It's just a basic white from Vallejo. And I'm going to be putting this on very, very quickly, by the way. So I've been watching very carefully. Living large, enjoy the casual arts and crafts while working. Yeah, oh, well, that's good. You do that. I know, Phil, you've got to work. You are a working creator. Me, I am a casual hobby creator. I am a non-professional. I am just a normal person. So, yes, my perspective and views may not be that useful to people, but we'll see. You never know. You might get something from this. Or you might not. Or you might just get to hang out while I paint this miniature. Anyway. So one of the first things I was noticing is that in my notes that I had made for the fighter, in terms of, because I've discussed it with my home group, what we want to do with the fighter, is at level 20. Like, being able to talk or communicate with the gods is a big deal. I feel like at this point I want something that's kind of like Champion of the Gods, level 20. So granting some sort of epic boon is what Wizards of the Coast is doing, right? Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that if the epic boons were any good. And the epic boons are actually not very good. And I'm not expecting them to be, let's increase their ability to hit harder, do more damage, hit more often, or combat focused. Even for the fighter, I'm not necessarily looking at that as a go-to. It might be, but not as a go-to. But I think that they have completely lost the plot when it comes to the epic boons, which means I'm going to have to rebuild epic boons myself so they actually relate to a level 20 character. Because at level 20, your problem with it as a fighter is not being able to hit a target. Usually at level 20, the only time you miss is if you roll a 2 on the 20-sided dice or you roll a 1. That's usually your modifier or your bonus to hit is so high that that's the only time that you're likely to miss. If you've ever played at level 20, you'll know this. So that's not actually necessary to bump up things like your ability scores or anything like that. Yeah, normal hobby is healthy, yeah, exactly. So, and then doing damage. Look, every fighter I've ever seen has usually required a cup to hold all the dice during their turn when rolling for damage. So damage is not an issue either. Now, yes, do you do as much damage as the casters? Probably not if you are dealing with multiple targets. But if you're dealing with a single target, you are probably going to smash the snot out of one target pretty effectively. Whereas a caster really isn't capable of doing that. Somebody like the paladin and the rogue are pretty good at doing that. But a fighter can still truck out a lot of damage. And if you multi-class, it gets more complicated again. Yep. So these aren't the problems. So, one, the epic boons, if we're going to take them at level 20, they need to actually relate to what you do at level 20. Level 20 is when you are traveling the multiverse, people, when you are dealing with kingdoms and warfare and negotiation, where resources are actually important, where your ability to travel from one place to another is actually more important in many respects. So having access to those sorts of resources is really helpful for a fighter. And if anything, I think a fighter should probably have some of the best resources available. Because your fighter is your soldier. Okay. And if it's not your soldier, it's your... it's going to be some sort of nobility or wind up with a title of some kind. So you're really the defenders of the realm, you know? Really, at level 20, you're the big shakers and movers. You might well be a king or a queen at this point. And they haven't really done anything like that. So that was the first thing, is I thought the epic boons need to be bumped up. I also made a note that when it came to things that I wanted them to have, I wanted them to have a gift of the gods. Now, I've called it gift of the gods, but it could be something else. I'm not entirely sure. But what I think needs to happen is at about level 17, because at level 17 it really doesn't matter. They need to get a legendary item, whether it's a gift or it's forged. I don't think it really matters too much, but I think there needs to be something like that. At level 17, a legendary magic item really won't have that much impact anymore. You know what I mean? It's not really going to destabilize the game. Because the game is so unstable at that point anyway, because you're playing at such a high level and you're dealing with such strange high-level threats. Hi, Prepare, Cook and Survive. How are you? Okay, I thought what I would do, and I don't know if this is going to work, is I'm going to paint one of these skeletons yellow, orange, red, another one green with lighter greens, another one blue, so blue flames, green flames, and red flames, just to shake things up. We'll see how that works. So I'm going to just splatter on, well, let's not say splatter on, but I'm going to try to put on the paint in such a way that I get a couple of different types of skeleton. Now this is a Citadel paint, which I shit, not because of the paint, but because of the pots. This is a sunset colour. It's supposed to be kind of like a yellow. I need a really deep yellow for this to work, and this is the only one I could think of that might actually do the job. But it's also looking kind of watery and a little shit, so we'll see. Okay, let's see if this goes on. Yellow is by far the worst colour. I might actually find that it's not going to work, So we'll see if this is going to actually go on all right. This is so watery. I'm almost feeling like I'm going to ditch it right away. So I'm going to ditch it right now. That's not going to work. 20th level scale of Sahagins can confirm. Yes, absolutely. So if you've played at high level, it's just nuts. So yeah, you don't need to worry too much about magic items at that point. Level 17 upward, she's all good. One of the things I've taken away from the fighter, which they had, which they should not have taken away, is the ability to own property as part of your character class. You got property rights. You could build a stronghold, or you were given a stronghold to protect. And I think that's an element that needs to be brought back. I'm going to put this thing into perjury in a second, people, and move it on to come back later and try to sort that problem out, because that's just not working at all. We'll grab another one. It's a good thing I got 3 here. Book came today. I'll post it tomorrow. No rush and no problem. Prepare, cook, and survive. To give you an idea, when Agile Monk sent me the books that so Agile Monk sent me the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons books for 2nd edition, and it took at least 3 months to get to me. We were wondering if it would even make it, but it did. It just took a really long time, and I think he used Amazon. It's just the postal system right now in my country is bad, but around the world, obviously, it seems to be pretty bad too, and it didn't work very well. So I'm going to attempt a different attack on this. I'm going to try what was it? Blue. So I've got a blue here. Cantor Blue. This is a Citadel paint as well. I'm trying to use the Citadel paints because they're a little bit thicker than the Army Painted paints. God, I hate these caps. Okay, that might be more promising. Has anybody ever used Citadel paints and had to go through the agony as your paint pot just spills everywhere? Because this is quite common. You know what I mean? Now, I would normally have to go light to dark, but I have to cover this thing as well. So that's another issue. So I have decided that the fighter for my group must have the ability. Okay, this is going to cover pretty good. And I'm just going to whack on the paint. I'm not going to worry about the skeleton for now. I'll pick the skeleton out later. I just want to get this paint into the crevices and the cracks and covered. So it's going to be an interesting development. I think in this case I might go darker and then to lighter. That might actually work for me better, even though that's completely the reverse of how fire works. But anyway. Yes, I was doing some study yesterday about how to paint these things. There's, I think, 2 videos that I found out there that sort of go over the process. And this brush is just completely shit for this purpose. I'm going to have to pick up a different brush, probably. Never mind. Okay. It's kind of going on. It's kind of hard to get it into the cracks, but I guess if I work it in, it'll go. The other thing is they took away from the fighter from later or earlier versions of it. They took away followers, and followers are a big factor. I think out of all the classes from older versions of D&D, the fighter had more followers than anybody else because they needed to be able to man all of their castle stuff. Do you know what I mean? You've spilled plenty of Games Workshop paints workstation covered in Earthshade. Lovely. Yeah, I hate their paints, and they deliberately do this. Like the entire market does this. They all make dropper bottles because it's the best way to apply paint out of your thing. But you know as well as I do that spillages, but not only just spillages, but just the loss of paint. The paint goes off and dries a lot more because you're opening and closing it. It's exposed to the air a lot more, and that's quite deliberate on their part. And I don't think they should get a get out of jail free card for that. I think they need to be confirmed as the arses they truly are. Anyway, away from paint issues and back to followers. So followers at level 10 for me. I think at least level 10. I think the followers need to be starting to come on board once you have a castle sort of in play. And I think at least the first followers maybe not be necessarily in droves. Maybe we start small, and as you level up you get more followers. I still like that idea. And then of course it'll cap out at a certain point. Maybe the first time you get your first follower will be like your squire. Do you know what I mean? So yes, that's definitely where my head is at. Agreed followers by the score. Wizards had a few apprentices. That's it. Yeah, exactly. Phil, this is this is what I was thinking. This is what my group. A lot of my group are quite old. You know what I mean? Well, I wouldn't say old, but you know, we're in the 50s and 40s, and so we were familiar with the older way of playing the game and the older versions of the game because we played them. Or some of us did anyway. Not all of us. Some of us are in our 40s and 30s and 20s, so it's sort of a big mix. But even the younger ones are all for give us strongholds and followers. This is why Matthew Colville's Kickstarter did so well, because he was on the right track, and it wasn't reinventing the wheel or anything like that. Okay, that paper towel is not going to work for me. I'm going to have to use a cloth to dry off. Okay, oh, bit of a juggle. Let's see if this paint will actually go in. Okay, that worked better. So the bristles of this brush are a little finer, a little bit easier to get the paint in there. Okay, let's grab some more paint then. Okay. And please do not spill. Okay, so going back to, so I'm almost, this is going on a lot better, so this will be a lot quicker now. Cool. Next, titles. I was talking to my group and they were like, what about titles? And they said they really wanted the titles to come back. So, but it seems to be the case with all the classes. They want titles for all the classes. So as you leveled up, you would gain a title of some kind to sort of distinguish yourself from everybody else, or a lower level fighter. And of course it didn't have a mechanical aspect to it. It just had a role play aspect to it. But as some of my group were pointing out, the thing with something like a oh, come on, yeah, go in that gap. Something like a title is you can try to use it in a mechanical sense, in terms of, you know, having influence over somebody, or because it's sort of it's an indication of the title is an indication of your fame and how important you are in the world. So it's a thing that you can still utilize in a mechanical sense. It's just not got any mechanics necessarily tied directly to it. It requires a bit of interplay between the players and the game master. And I was like, okay, fair enough, I get it. And it was a big ask, the bring back titles. So we bringing back titles, and I noticed that Shadowdark has done that. They brought back the titles. Got titles there. They are a thing in the game. Okay, that one is now blue. And this one here, is it dry? Mostly dry. We'll move that and put that over there. I'm going to give that a little bit longer. I'm going to grab this one because this is mostly dry. So close this. This is the blue is done. Poof. Don't need you. What's that? Prepare, cook and survive. Followed that acts like a caddy handing you the best weapon for your finishing blow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your first follower is like your caddy. You're playing golf. And in your D&D game, it's you're playing golf. I think that's quite funny. Hi, Shiner81. In my campaign, I give titles for every time the mage gains more spell levels. Didn't occur to me to do that for the martial classes too. I think we need to give titles to all of the classes. All the classes need to have them. Okay, so I've got this Kobold red here, which I think is dark as, but it might actually cover the miniature. So I just don't think the lighter ones will. So I'm kind of going in the in a totally different direction, the fire is going to look so strange. Oh, geez, it came out a lot. I hope this covers well, because if it doesn't, it's going to be a mistake. Okay, let's see. Well, it does. Look at that. So going darker was actually not a bad idea. Oh, hang on. Maybe not. It's still a little bit translucent. Okay, let's just keep doing this. This is going to be an experiment on an experiment. At least I got 3 experiments to work with. And the paint is definitely going in the grooves, so that's a nice aspect to this whole process. Okay, I need a drink of water, and then I will continue. Now, for those of you who were wondering when was I going to actually say something about fighting? Well, I was. One of the things we discussed, my group and me, and that is fighting styles. We wanted to have fighting styles. And I was like, okay. And they said, but the fighting, it's all very well. And I said, you kind of got fighting styles already with the Battlemaster. And he said, yes, but we want the fluff as well. It's just a mechanical thing. There's no decent fluff to go with it. And I'm like, okay, so you want it to be narratively make sense. And I was like, yeah, that's what we want, narratively make sense combat styles for our fighter. And I said, well, some of them are. And they said, yeah, but not all of them. And I was like, okay, all right, so that's on the cards to deal with as well. And I said, fine. Okay, so we'll look at combat styles, fighting styles, and making sure the narrative fits the mechanics. And if we've got a mechanic that doesn't have a good narrative to it, then we just don't use it. And they said, yeah. And I'm like, okay. I said, well, most of the work is done by the Battlemaster. What if you just made all the Battlemaster's main features available? And now they've got these weapon mastery things that Wizards of the Coast is trying to do. So it's kind of another way of going about this, I guess. What do you got here? No mistakes, only happy little accidents, right? Yeah, I'm not the Bob Ross of New Zealand. Or was Bob Ross not a thing in New Zealand? I've heard of Bob Ross. Apparently Bob Ross came to a sticky end, but I mean, all artists usually do. If you're an artist and you don't come to a sticky end, you probably weren't that much of an artist. Is there any artist that didn't have some sort of controversy around them? And in this day and age where there's social media, it would be much worse. I mean, of course, Bob Ross was around a long time ago. I don't think he's not a thing now, right? I know that there's a lot of memes and jokes about Bob Ross. He obviously left a mark. Hardly anybody talks now about Picasso. Bob Ross, General Joe knows about Bob Ross. Even Michelangelo doesn't pop up that much. Charles Butler is a patron, by the way, for those of you who are unaware. Hello, how are you? Thank you for coming today. Okay, right. So, I'm going to do something with styles for fighters. There's going to be a lot of work, I can see that. I think that'll wind up being the most customizable aspect of the whole process too. Okay, so is this coated? I think it is. Good. All right, move that out of the way. And wash up my brush. I'm going to be moving on to another color. So that's red. We're going to do a green. So green flames. Green flames. That's what we want. Oh, Bob Ross is a big thing with smokers. Are you all right? You're talking about grass, aren't you? Like lawn grass. Okay, right. So I'm going to use Vallejo this time. Vallejo deep green. Because I just don't think the other paints are going to be thick enough to actually coat and cover. So we'll see how this goes. And I'm also a little bit worried that at the rate that I'm going and the speed that I'm going, we're going to have problems with it drying. I think that's going to be a big factor. It's not actually that hot today. It's actually sort of nice and mild. So it means everything's going to dry slow. Which might have to whip over to my face and you just see me talking. Which would probably be fine. I've got my camera ready to go if it need be. Okay, let's see if the screen goes on. The screen is going on. La da 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 da. Next on my list of things, and that is, we decided that the biggest factor with the fighter that is lacking is the lack of utility. We know it, you know it, everybody knows it. Utility function, really all the fighter does is fight. Oh, there's a bit of white in here that's still wet. That's why it's going muddy. No. Okay, it's just not drying fast enough. So because of this, this is one of the things we had to sit down and really have a hard think about. And I didn't do a very good job with the monk in terms of brainstorming ideas, but we did get a couple. But with the fighter, we got a whole bunch of different ideas to build out the utility of our fighters in the game that I can incorporate, which I'm really excited about because I think it'd make a huge difference. And since we've already got somebody in our group who's playing a multi-classed fighter, that would be quite good. Although I don't think that these changes that I'm suggesting are good for multi-classing. I think they need to be standalone on their own without dipping into another class. That's just my opinion. Green flame eggs. Green flames eggs. I don't know what that is. What is that? You've explained it a bit more. Explain. So yes, utility was one of the big things we were looking at. I think one of the players is, so JP, one of the players in the group, he's from the military, ex-military. So we wanted to have some sort of way of indicating military rank. If you wanted to go the way of the soldier, then we needed to have some sort of military rank that you could use within the game in some way. And then we were talking about, like, what did you need to do as a soldier? What was soldiering like? Because the fighter and the soldier as a concept are very, very similar, right? So we're like, what are the sorts of things you need to do other than being able to use weapons and fight in combat? And he said, look, forced marching without getting exhausted. We were trained to be able to travel long distances, longer than any other people, to get our gear and ourselves from one place to another. And I was like, well, that actually makes a lot of sense. So forced march without getting exhausted. The ability for a fighter to be able to go for more than 8 hours without having to worry about becoming exhausted in some way, because they're actually good at that. That's what they train to do, is to get from one place to another and still be equipped and capable of fighting when they got to the end of their travel. But also the fact they could just cover longer distances or travel further in some way. So, yeah. That's sort of another thing that was sort of dancing around in our head. So that's definitely going to wind up being something I include into the game for the fighter as a utility. And of course, it may not come up that often, but it's there if you do need it. Do you know what I mean? Big Trouble in Little China had to look up. Been ages since I've seen the movie. Okay. Oh, okay. Big Trouble in Little China. I haven't watched it for a while. I know we've cracked jokes about the movie. How are you, Kevin Scott? Kevin Scott, 76. Still have D&D pewter figures I paint back in 1979 and 1982 on my shelf. I still have miniatures that old. I still have miniatures that old. That's when you had to use Humbrol paints. Humbrol paints were just awful. I never really enjoyed using Humbrol paint, as is the standard process, right? Yeah, there are green flames in Big Trouble in Little China. That's right, a lot of green flame. Oh, Eggshem. Eggshem is the friendly sorcerer. Oh, right, with the squinted eye. Yeah, I think I remember now what you're talking about. Some really ridiculous names in that movie. Like, it's all in good fun. Okay, so this is definitely going to be green. This is going to be green flames, and it is coating and covering, which is good news. I can tell you now that the other miniatures are not drying fast at all. I'm going to wind up spending my time here just chatting to the camera. I can see that now. So you get half a live stream of painting things a colour, followed by me talking an awful lot. Okay, so Force March, navigating by compass with maps and not getting lost during the day. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's the Ranger. And I said, no, the Ranger is another step up. So we've already thought about that because we were worried about stepping on the toes of the Ranger. And we said, no, most soldiers, most fighters would probably have a compass. And if they didn't have a compass, they had a needle so they can make a compass from water. You know, you place the needle in water and it will point to north, and you just stroke it a certain number of times against your sleeve to magnetize it, and it would just shift in the water nicely. So that's like how you'd make one if you didn't have a compass. But a fighter should have a compass. So we decided that maps and compasses are a thing for fighters that we need to include. I'm just checking my miniature to make sure it is completely covered. It is. We're going to have a look at these other ones that I've been painting in a second and just see if I'm doing things right. So Kevin Scott, I'm not even going to mention that. Do you know what I mean? I'm not even going to mention that. And yeah, unfortunately, that's one comment I'm just going to leave. I don't like it when somebody refers to somebody else as a fantasy creature. There's enough silly nonsense on social media as it is. So this is not a stab at you, not giving you a hard time, Kevin Scott, but I'm removing that comment. I just don't want it there. Okay? I don't see any connection between fantasy creatures and what we do in our D&D games or role-play games. And if there is a connection to it, the connection shouldn't be there as far as I'm concerned. So it's gone for me. Okay, so this is still drying. And there are a couple of spots on it that I could probably cover. They didn't cover very well. Just one little spot at least. I don't know that these are going to dry in time. It's just not warm enough in my office. It is getting hotter, but I don't think it's going to dry fast enough to be able to do very much with today, which is a shame. Can I brush off? If I brush off, will that help or just make it worse? I'll go over and brush off and see if that works a little bit. It might help dry out some of the patches in there. Because it's going to have to be dry enough for me to be able to brush over with a dry brush to be able to do this, and this is not going to work. Okay, I'm glad you understand. Cool. So yeah, navigating for the fighter seems to be a thing. Now, navigating at night is not something a fighter would normally do, because navigating at night is too problematic. I think that's the Ranger, that's the SEAL team, that's the Special Forces sort of concept. I don't think that's what the fighter is. And then we wanted to connect remarkable athlete to the fighter as a standard. Like, if you know from the Champion, you know that there is the remarkable athlete, which is not a particularly fantastic ability, but it makes sense for the fighter. So we decided that we wanted to have that as a standard feature for our fighter, no matter what you were playing. So remarkable athletes going there. And then we decided that endurance needed to be a skill that you didn't pick. You just had endurance. Like something that would allow you to sort of indicate endurance. So we were thinking, like, how do we make that look? And 4E, endurance was an actual skill. And 5E it's not. So obviously that's going to have to be indicated, presented in a different way. I think what it means is advantage on constitution checks, and saving throws get a bonus, which I think they already do. So the blue is drying, but it's drying very slow. So I'm going to put these in front of me and just have a quick gander and see if there's anything that I can do to fix this, but I don't think I can. And I'm going to, unfortunately, move away from the paints because it's still drying. I'm going to go to my face. I guess we're talking today. And yes, my face means I'm not got a hat on. Okay, people, there's no hat. So I'm sorry, no hat. Not only that, is there no hat, is I am probably not going to be putting on a fancy shirt if I'm painting miniatures. This is an old shirt. So while we're waiting for paint to dry, which is not fun. I will move into the center a little bit, out of position from where I would normally be for painting. And let's talk about the fighter. Why not? We might as well. You're here, I'm here, I'm waiting for paint to dry. Watching paint dry must be like watching grass grow, right? So for those of you who are here painting, I will talk while you do your painting, and you can replay this. Back to the fighter while we wait for my paint to dry. Yeah, it's going to take a little while. I wonder if I can put it near a lamp? I could put it near a lamp, couldn't I? If I turn a lamp on, will that do anything whack? It probably will, but it might actually dry it out faster. What does this have? Oh my, yeah, okay. Let's do that. Let's position this a little bit like this. Yeah. Cook my miniatures, baby. Come on, light. Cook my miniatures. Dry out. The light is not that hot, so it's probably not going to work. Ramlet was disappointed with the lack of yeah, the hat is off. I'm on holiday. So fighter. So I said a remarkable athlete needed to be part of the fighter standard. Endurance, so I've kind of discussed that one. Learning battle tactics in the field. I think what I want to do is I want to make the battle masters different features. I want to adjust them and change them a little bit, and I want to take some of the weapon mastery stuff that Wizards of the Coast is attaching to weapons and make them specific fighting styles or things that you can utilize in the game. But we're also learning battle tactics. I was like, how do you duplicate learning battle tactics? I've seen what Wizards of the Coast tried to do, and it's too metagamey for me. I despised it. So I don't know how to do that, but we need to have something that means that the more you fight something, the more your battle tactics will improve over time with them as you learn how they operate. So I'm not sure how that's supposed to work, but I will think about it a bit more. Also, digging a foxhole and trenches. For those of you who are unaware, trench warfare has been around a little while. Trench warfare was actually designed and created, as far as I remember, in the way that it was used by the Maori, which is kind of surprising. I didn't realize that. And then it transitioned over to World War II. So trench warfare is a thing. And also World War One, of course. But yeah, so trench warfare, I thought digging foxholes and trenches more effectively. I know that's really, really strange. Building fortifications, definitely. I think fighters should be able to build fortifications fairly quickly and effectively with the resources around them. So that's another thing. That's kind of what we were talking about. Some sort of leadership aspect to the fighter at higher levels. We were discussing this and like, what is a good way of doing that? And we haven't really figured that one out, but we know that leadership needs to be a factor. And of course, leadership does sort of fall into, well, you've got followers, so it makes sense, but leadership of some kind, we don't know how that's going to look. Trained and domesticated animals for riding. We decided that like every soldier usually gets trained at some point, particularly if you look at medieval times, and how to ride a horse. Now, even if it's not a war horse, it's definitely a horse for traveling from one place to another. I like the idea of having that transition of learning to ride a horse and then transitioning into learning to ride a war horse, or a war elephant, or some other animal that's designed for fighting. Hello, Dungeons and Chronics, how are you? I'm waiting for my paint to dry, so what? That's why you can see my face. We also decided that building siege equipment and operating siege equipment, basic engineering for a fighter seemed to be something that we thought was a good idea. This kind of goes back to fighting to a certain degree, but it's a different type of fighting. It's sieging castles and things like that. So yeah, I wanted to fill that in. Filling sandbags and digging shell scrape. Yes, absolutely. All of those prepare, cook and survive. I agree. Those sorts of things. Rather than the title, the fighter rank could increase. Yes. Well, I think the title and the rank is the same sort of thing in some way. Well, I'll figure it out. But yes, definitely being able to do basic engineering and prepare shelters for, whether it's put up a tent or build a shelter, from the trees and leaves around you. Building a quick bridge, like I was talking to JP, and JP said, well, we often had to build a quick bridge to navigate across things, because if you've got a force that needs to travel, you can't be all just sloshing through a river. You lose equipment, it gets lost. So sometimes you just stop. Somebody puts together a work team and you build a bridge. So the skills for building a bridge seem to be something that would make sense for a fighter. He said he was an engineer in the army, so he had better skills, but everybody else had some degree of understanding on how to do that. So I was like, okay, cool. How many people would a fighter with 20 charisma be able to lead? 19 charisma, etc. I suppose charisma used to be used to sort of indicate your ability to lead, and also how many followers you had. Like that affected it, right? Camouflage the camp or fortifications. Yes, that's another thing. Camouflage is a good point. I hadn't thought about that. I had put down here some bush survival skills, but less than the ranger. So if you think about your marine or your basic infantry and stuff like that, your basic soldier, your mercenary, their skills probably won't be as high as somebody like a ranger, and I think the ranger sort of represents like the SAS or the Navy SEALs or special forces, stuff like that. So it won't be quite at that level, but there's got to be something there. And then a military guild membership. We wanted to have a military guild membership, and iron nerves, so you didn't feel fear quite so much. So those were a bunch of ideas that we were throwing around for the fighter that we wanted to include. I don't know how to fit them all in. At this present time, it's starting to feel like it's too much, but it's a brainstorm. Okay, let's have a look and see if my miniatures are actually drying. Well, that one's still quite wet. I put a lot of paint on them, so... And that's still drying. I don't have a hair dryer to be able to dry the miniatures. This is going to be a bit of a bummer. Okay. All right, well, I'll leave them there. I guess while I'm doing that, I might as well just open these here. Let's open these miniatures. I'm going to paint them at some point anyway, so I might as well open them up. So let's do that now. I'll go back to the other screen. See if I can do this without knocking everything over. I have positioned everything in a very strange line right by my mouse. So this is the miniatures that I'll be painting in the future. This is the Stone Defender and the Oaken Bolter. I don't know when it'll be getting done, at some point. Tattoo on his insignia to show a faction for the fighter. Yes, that would be quite good. Like some of the special forces have a special forces tattoo, didn't they? I don't like the idea of forcing a tattoo onto somebody. But yes, it's an interesting idea. So this is the back of it. So there's a lot of brown colours. Is that brown or bronze? There's a lot of bronze and brown and greys. This miniature here, this Stone Defender, is going to be so difficult to paint. I think both of them will be, because there's so many little nooks and crannies to get at. I'm leaving my skeletons to dry. 3 of them, little suckers they are. Okay, so that's interesting. How much work is there to do on this? As far as I can tell, this little sucker, maybe I could put a coat of paint on this now, because I don't see any real seam lines. Man, this is actually really good. Am I just blind? People, do you see it? I think this is actually ready to go. It's primed. These are pre-primed, these ones, and it's not like the Blazing Skeletons. I'd had to prime those myself, but I think I'll paint that. I'll paint that now, and then there's a couple of bases. This here, what is that like? So hard to get at. Well, interesting. Let's go. I'll paint this brown, and I'll give this a base of a grey. I'll put a grey base over it right now, so that I'm at least doing some painting. So those were all my ideas for the fighter so far. If you have any additional ideas on the fighter as I paint, you let me know. But I'm going to continue doing this because I was enjoying putting the paint on, even if it wasn't that fancy. We'll consider this a jump ahead. And if the blazing skeletons actually dry out, then I'll put some paint on those. We'll see how we go. It's been raining outside. Okay, it's been raining quite hard actually. And now I want to go with a brown for that, but I want to put a grey on this. I'll use the grey first. I'm going to use this Lich Skin Grey. So we'll put some of that on. Give it a shake. That'll be my next one. Get to you in a second. Stay there. No, my brother has got an airbrush. Problem is, an airbrush in a live stream, it's really noisy. My brother was saying you could do it, but it would be quite noisy. And I think when he's done it himself, it has been quite a racket. So yes, an airbrush would put it on a lot. You know, spraying is usually more effective than brushing on. It just takes longer. I agree. But also too, I don't paint enough, and I'm not good enough to really warrant having an airbrush. Not for that expense. I've got enough things to deal with. I'm going to pay my mortgage off first. So let's, yes. I'm going to go grey, and then I'll put other colours on later. Let's see if this actually gets on. This is going to be so hard to get at. Like a little brush, my little eye, my poor eyes, and going to be a pain. Okay. I might have to squeeze out a bit more paint, which is good. At least it's going in. I don't use good brushes for everything that I do, by the way, people. I've got some... This is a really bad brush. You can see that the end of it is just worn away. That's how bad it is. And it's cheap. I didn't go and spend the most amount of money I could on some of these brushes. Oh, boy. I'm still fighting the lurgy, if you're wondering. It's just... I mean, I'm still taking the medication. Antibiotics are going into the system, but it's just not... It's not getting done as fast as I would like. This is not going to do me any good if it goes splooch everywhere. Will this work? All right. Maybe the toothpick will help me clear it. Let's try again. Okay, that's better. Gotcha. And moving on. Oh, that's better. A bit more paint flying on a bit better. Cool. So, if you're wondering why I bought these, I didn't buy these. These are a gift. Okay? I don't buy small miniatures if I can help it, because I know I can't really get at them and get them done in a decent way. It's just too difficult nowadays. So I always go for larger stuff, which means usually monsters. I think the last time I painted a character miniature was when I was in my teens. Maybe 18 or 19. Maybe I was even 20. I could have been 20 possibly. Scott, what about the ability to go into a rage or go berserk, maybe like Roller? I think berserk and rage needs to be left for the barbarian. I think that... I mean, I have some ideas on what to do with the barbarian, and I don't want to cross that line. I don't think it should have that. That's not stopping you from homebrewing it, but yeah, I don't want to step on the toes of the barbarian, and I feel like rage is one of those. How are we doing with these? Are they drying at all? They're taking so long. Yeah, they're taking so long. Okay, more of this grey, and then we'll get the other one coated as well. I think one of the rather cruel things that happens when you have lots of options and you can multi-class is you rob some of the classes, because a lot of the multi-class options are just taking another class's feature. And you know, certainly 5e made multi-classing more possible, but it also kind of broke the game, which is kind of what a lot of people like, is they like the game broken and, you know, not balanced and a little bit uneven, or a bit of rough around the edges and stuff like that. But even though I have multi-classed, I'm not a fan of it myself. And one of the things I always found amusing is Wizards of the Coast always says, you know, got to be careful about what you do with some of the features, because you could wind up taking features that really were designed and intended to be used by a particular class, and they wind up making it available to everybody. And they've done that now. That's all there is there's just all this stuff that's around, you know, giving everybody everything that is another class used to have as a key feature, which is just it's not cool. Unless, of course, you get rid of the class system completely and you just have options that you build, which, I don't know. I don't know. Is it still D&D when you do something like that? I think it's kind of so intrinsic into the whole game now. We got to prepare. Fighter could use ships, cavalry, artillery. So that's something that I hadn't mentioned, like vehicles. I think that there should be a section for vehicles for the fighter. I was thinking sailing ships, maybe later on, even a submarine for a fighter seemed reasonable. But a wagon early on, access to a horse, these sorts of things. And you can have like a progression depending on what level like you are. You get better access to transport modes. It wouldn't be something, oh, I've got to wait until I save up a certain amount of money. No, you just assume that when you get to that level, you've got the resources to get that stuff. That would be kind of nice. I get it. These are civilized fighters. Is there such a thing? That's not really the reason, though, for doing it. The reason is not to take something from the barbarian. The barbarian is the rager. Do you know what I mean? We want the barbarian to still have aspects to them that don't just indicate that they are a fighter that doesn't wear armor, or if they do wear armor, they're mostly naked. You know what I mean? It's yeah, because that's where you wind up heading eventually, don't you? Okay, I don't have another little container I can stick this on, so I can paint this without painting my fingers right now, unfortunately. So I'm going to have grey fingers at the end of this. Yeah. Okay, that's you painted. I'll put you over here. You won't be drying anytime soon, I guess. And we'll be doing the next one. And how are my little skeletons doing? Hello, how are you guys? Are you dry? No. Are you getting drier? Yes, but very slowly. Which means I will be finishing up early rather than trying to continue on if it's not going to dry and I'm painting these things. We get an hour and friend goes, I guess. But I ain't gone yet. Let's do this. Let's put on some brown. Now, where's my brown? Owlbear brown's pretty dark. So this is Owlbear brown. I think I'm going to start with that, with the oaken bolter, and give it a good shake. Yeah, playing in the 70s and early 80s, things were more immediate and fun. Come back to the 90s, it was just complicated. Yes, I totally get that. I did have a discussion with regard to the fighter with my group, and I said, they were saying we want like fighting styles to the fighter, and I said, what is it that you want to be able to do? Or what about tripping something up? And I said, well, why don't you just say you want to trip somebody up? Does there have to be a game mechanic for it? I think this is part of the problem, is people are assuming that they can only do something if there's a game mechanic that says they can do it. And I don't even know if that's necessarily the younger generation's problem, because this is coming from these words came from people who have been playing for a long time. This is not necessarily new age players or beginner players who've been playing for 6 months or even a couple of years. These are people who've been playing for decades. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of concept where you look at this and like, why don't you see options when you just haven't tried it? You haven't tried to do something like it. You said you want to trip them up with your whip. You just explain to me what you want to try to do, and then I figure out how to adjudicate it. That's that's the only thing. And yeah, I think that's part and parcel of the problem. And I suppose tripping somebody up would be kind of quite a skill-based thing. To be able to do it successfully without it all going pear-shaped, probably a bit of a skill, right? Probably would take a little bit of training. Let's get inside the mouth here. Come on, open up wide. And there we go. Almost got the inside of that done. This brush is way too big, but at least it's all going on. So many nooks and crannies are going to be just impossible to get at. I'm putting the brown on because if I put a bronze straight over this grey, it's probably not going to work very well. So I'm putting the brown on first, if you're wondering why the oaken bolt is getting coated in brown. That's the reason. So metallic paints I don't think actually go on very well without something else there. Alright, you can see it's quite thin too. Alright, let's do a bit more. Yeah, How are people finding my little discussions here about the different classes for 5e? Are you enjoying the discussion, or is there something else you would have preferred me to discuss? Because I'm like, I talk about pretty much anything. I'm hoping that I get well enough that I can probably go to the movies. I want to go and see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And it has been tempting to go and see that Mario Brothers movie too, but I've never really been a Mario Brothers fan. I never really enjoyed playing those video games. So possibly the jokes just won't land with me. Just because I never sort of grew up on them. I knew that they were around during my time, but I just never grew up enjoying those things. And video games was quite a tricky thing for me to get at. Like, I played some, but I didn't have access to everything. Certainly not the best or most popular video games. Quite often I was playing video games that nobody else was. Now I can't really play them at all. You like it, Phil? I'm glad you like it, Phil. I know you like it, Phil, because you're doing that sort of design work now, aren't you? As you're working on Marshalls, if I remember right, in your live stream. So Phil's got a YouTube channel, people, if you didn't know. And he does a lot of design work in his live streams. You can see him actually doing stuff. And he kind of explains as he's going while he's doing it, which is good. I like hearing how various tables create different solutions. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was fun. So you've seen it, Phil. Okay, good. Yeah, no spoilers. I know you know not to tell me any spoilers. I know you know. I know you won't do that. I'm glad to hear it. I've been enjoying a lot of the movies that I've seen recently. There's been so many good movies. There's like so many good movies. I really liked I liked Black Adam, and I liked Shazam 2, and I enjoyed the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I had a good time with all of those. I didn't wind up going and seeing Creed 3 because Creed 3 just felt like it was doing the same thing over again, and whether you like Stallone or not, Sylvester Stallone, I got the impression that there was some really bad blood and some things happened with Creed 3 that did not bode well. And it's weird when you write out the main star of a franchise when they're still alive, and the person who originally wrote the first story, Rocky, And if you look at the Rocky movies, the Rocky movies are simply a retelling of the same story over and over again in a different way, but essentially the same story. So I don't understand why you would write out the person who spent 10 or so years out of that franchise when they were still alive. That seems a little bit like folly to me. So I think that's part of the reason why I decided not to, even though I heard that Creed 3 was a really good movie. I think my biggest issues were like, why would you do that? Like, you know, I know the character Rocky was getting old and sick and so forth, but writing him out like that when he wasn't actually dead just seems like a foolish thing to do. Anyway. Let's see if I can get this in here. Dungeons and Chronics. Whoa! Oh, no. Oh, I had an accident. Whoopsie daisies. What's this? Here. Fred, it doesn't matter what you do. I like coming here to hang out and appreciate you. And oh, well, that's good. Cool. I'm just sorry that the flaming skulls are just not drying fast enough. It's actually getting quite warm in my office, but it's not enough to actually solve the problem. So I guess I'm just putting this brown on for today, which is kind of weird. Hi, Big Kid. Big Kid is a patron and supports me on Patreon. How are you doing? So airbrush is super hard. How are you doing with that airbrush? So have you decided that using an airbrush is really, really difficult to do, Big Kid? I think what you need to do is what David had suggested, is watch a few YouTube channels to get a grip of, get to grips with how to go about using it. He said that you will need to actually look at somebody else doing it first. So I think that's probably the best way to go if you're finding it hard. I'm no expert in the use of an airbrush. It's not my tool. It's his tool. He uses it all the time. Anyway, this is just not going where I want it to. Either I'm not putting enough paint on the brush. The brush is too big, maybe. I don't know. What do you got here? Using for fine details. Yeah. Definitely need to learn. Okay. Well, you kind of already knew that was going to be the case, didn't you? When the discussion came up about using an airbrush and so forth, I think you already had established that was going to be a learning process to get through. So I'm going to say right now that getting into these nooks and crannies on this miniature, this miniature is such a pain to paint. I mean, I'm getting there slowly, but good lord, and I want it with paint all over my fingers too. I'm going for grey to brown fingers. Yeah, definitely grey to brown. Can you put an update on the dragon turtle in Discord, please? Oh yes, Big Kid. We are interested how your dragon turtle is going. That mighty project of yours. So for those of you who are wondering, I will do some shorts. I might even put some photos up of the miniatures that I've been working on, because it's not that hard for me to do. I just do it on my phone. Like, it takes like a couple of seconds. So for those of you who wanted to see the miniature we were working on yesterday, I can do that. That's probably not going to be too hard for me to do it all. And doing a shorts for it, doing a little spin around, I'm sure that can be managed as well. So they'll I don't know when they'll come up, pop up, but they will. I'll make sure I do them. Okay, let me just grab a bit more of this brown. My son is a dungeon. Really? Your son is a dungeon? How did your son become a dungeon? Must tell me more. Tell me more, please. Tell me more. The good news is that when we come back to dealing with the Flaming Skulls tomorrow, chances are it'll just be a lot of dry brushing, a little bit of detail, and so lots of action on those. So for those of you who showed up like hoping to see a lot happening with them, do apologise. Come on, you, get in there. But I can assure you tomorrow should be much better. I don't think I'm necessarily going to get a better picture of them. I actually had to make the picture. I used AI art. I took an image of a miniature that was painted. It was a really bad image, and I used AI art to dress it up. Because there wasn't even a conceptual drawing for the blazing skeleton. That would help me. I will show you how far they have dried. How's that sound? Okay, let's get rid of this. Master, pretty cool. He's continuing the adventures. Oh, okay. Oh, so he's a game master. He's a dungeon master. Your son's a dungeon master, Kevin. That's good news. I like that. That's cool. I want you to be able to. I want you as a parent, whether you're a father, mother. I want you to be able to play with your kids. This was why I decided to create mazes and monstrosities. It's obviously not finished, mazes and monstrosities, but the intention is that a 5-year-old be able to play with you, or a 6-year-old, so you don't have to worry about that, and be able to play the game that you play, because they always want to play that. It's all very well. Oh, we'll go and play a game that's designed for you. No, we want to play D&D. Do you know what I mean? They want to play the game that the parents are playing. But it needs, of course, to be stripped down enough to be able to do that. Okay, so this is the green one. This is the blue one. They're still not dry enough to do very much with. This here is the... Oh, what is this? This is the red one. This is a darkish red, by the way, if you're wondering what's going on here. It is mostly dry, but I think it's probably too risky to start dry brushing over this thing right now, so I won't. Instead, we will consider this as good as we get for today. Come back to them tomorrow. There are 3 of them, so I don't know if it's going to take me... Maybe it'll take me 3 days to get all 3 done, because it's 3 miniatures, right? And an hour to paint a miniature. I'm not really a speed painter. I never really have been. But that's probably the smartest way to look at this, is we cover these, and I just keep working on them until they're done. And yeah, we'll go from there. If I could continue working on them, I would, but they're just not dry enough to do so. So when you're doing your Flaming Skulls, my advice to you is don't jump the gun. Let them dry up completely, come back, go have a cup of tea, go do something else, do some housework, and then hit them with lighter colours. Now the idea is supposed to be that you start with a light colour and you work to a darker colour. I am going to kind of go in the opposite direction. I'm going to go with a darker colour and go to a lighter colour, which is going to look completely bizarre. But the magical skeletons, aren't they? Let me just put these up, and you guys are in chat. I'm in chat. Let's just go to my face for now. How's that? That's going to be easier. All right, I'll put my glasses on, have a drink of water before I disappear. Today's the day that I continue to read through Esper's Emporium of Esoterica. And what else am I reading right now? A couple of other things. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. That'll be good. I'll get rid of this light. That doesn't need to be there. So, Big Kid, I'm running a session for my nephew's birthday. Oh, cool. He's turning 5. Got to do that Dragon Turtle versus... Oh my gosh, you really? So you're going to have your 5-year-old playing. So, Big Kid, are you going to be using... Are you going to be using D&D 5e? Are you going to be using a different system to play with your 5-year-old nephew? If he's turning 5, he's going to be quite young. Are you going to be playing a different game? Are you going to try the game that I put up? I'm kind of curious. I would very much like to know. This is a good time to test the theory. And the game that I put up on my Patreon is essentially 5e stripped right back. It's just, I just gutted it. I just took a hacksaw, a chainsaw to it, and just chopped off everything I could. I do a modified where they only roll a d20. Yes. So what you're describing, if I remember right, is what Sadie Rogers has told me, is that you have a whole lot of DCs that you know are roughly the DCs you would have to hit for their level for their character. And it's probably something that I should consider doing, is actually doing something like that. You'll report back, or I can try yours. So if I remember right, there is a modifier you add. But the only modifier you have to contend with is the ability modifier. There's no proficiency modifier that you add. So with an ability check, you would just roll the ability modifier and add the ability modifier to the 20-sided dice roll. So there will be a number that they use, but often the numbers will be exactly the same. In terms of skills, I removed all of the skills. And if you use a skill, you just use an ability check instead of a skill check. So it means that when you're doing a skill check, you just look at the skill, what is the ability that it's related to, and you just pick the modifier only. That's the only thing you add to the dice. Now, a 5-year-old might be able to handle rolling a dice and adding a number to it. I don't know if that's going to necessarily work for them, but I'll be curious. I suspect that I might have to change it to be able to work that way. With an attack roll, for example, with an attack roll, whether it's a melee attack or a ranged attack, you use whichever is higher. It's either your dexterity modifier or your strength modifier. That's it. There's no proficiency bonus. There's just that modifier. So that means that you're always using the same modifiers for the same things. When it comes to rolling for damage, when you're doing your damage dice, you use either your dexterity or your strength modifier, whichever is higher. It doesn't matter if you're making a ranged attack or a melee attack, close quarter attack. So you just pick the highest number. And I think that's simple enough to make it work. Your DCs are exactly the same. So your DCs are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and it caps out at 30. It doesn't go any higher than that. Your armor class is calculated exactly the same. You know, you add your armor bonuses. These are things you will have done for them already, right? You'll have added all the armor bonuses and so forth. So, you know, if you've got a shield, if you've got a armor, you're wearing armor. Otherwise, it's just your dexterity modifier plus 10. And I'm pretty sure I put the formulas in there so you didn't have to hunt for them. So yes, it's there. Nobody's actually told me very much about what they think of it so far. I've had 2 people press the like button on Patreon. It's completely free. So it was there to try out, and nobody's told me where there are problems. So I haven't had a chance, and I haven't tried it out with my group because, first of all, Simon, who's being the game master or dungeon master in my group right now, he is running a slightly different version of 5e than you're probably used to. Yeah, finish reading the PDF. Tell me, Big Kid, if it's too much. If I've not made it simple enough, or have I not been clear enough? You'll also find that you don't necessarily have to roll dice. Often you can just use the ability score. So if their ability score is equal to or greater than the DC for a check, then they succeed. So this eliminates a lot of the dice rolling from the game, where you should be good at something and you don't have to deal with the vagaries of randomness on a dice roll. So if you have a strength of 18 and the DC is a 16, then you wouldn't roll the dice, you would just use the strength score. So it really helps eliminate a lot of that 20-sided dice rolling and the maths from the game. Because the maths is already there, we should be using ability scores in the first place. So this is one of the reasons why I was hoping that using something like ability scores would be useful for people, because it just removes a lot of the math rolling that you would never need to have to actually engage in. Now, I know players love rolling dice, But there's a point where it's frustrating when you should be good at something, but you rolled a 1. And no matter how big your number is, the 1 is going to be a bit of an issue. Now, I also have I have failure on a 1 and automatic success on a 20. And if you don't want automatic failure on a 1 or automatic success on a 20, then why are you rolling the dice? Which is why I explain this in the PDF. Because if you're rolling dice and you could still never hit it, why did you ask them to do that in the first place? And this is a discussion I've had with people many, many times. Yeah, kids especially do love rolling dice. But if you tell them they have a static number, and if their number is high enough to, and all they have to do is tell you what that number is, great, and they succeed, awesome. If it's not high enough, then you get them to roll the dice because there's a chance that they may succeed. Does that make sense? So we only roll dice when we absolutely have to. They're still going to be rolling dice for your damage. You'll still have to roll dice for saving throws. Saving throws will still require dice rolls. Your attack rolls will still require dice rolls. It's just your ability checks and your skill checks where you'd rely more on the ability score. Does that make sense? Because it's related only to ability score, ability checks and skill checks. It would not be related to an attack roll or a saving throw. That's a completely different animal in itself. So, yeah. Okay, I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, to paint the rest of the stuff on these flaming skeletons because they are not dry. And but I think this is going to work out. At least I've got our base color on there. It's a shame I did not get as much done as I'd hoped, but yes, these things happen sometimes, don't they? Anyway, I'm going to say, almost forgot. What about this poll? This poll here. Do you think the fighter for Dungeons & Dragons 5e needs fixing? Yes, 50%. Undecided, 25%. No, 12%. Just watching, 12%. Interesting. How's it going, Tabletop Bob? How are you? I hope that you are doing well. How's it going, Bob? Anyway, so wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours if they are not zombies or monsters and are not trying to eat you. Maybe check out Tabletop Bob because he does a lot of live play. He's got his own YouTube channel, by the way. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Unfortunately, Bob, the paint did not dry fast enough. But I've got paint on at least 5 miniatures. Back tomorrow.